The fear of success is one of the most misunderstood psychological forces shaping human behavior. People often assume that fear drives us away from failure, danger, or embarrassment, but they rarely consider that the same emotion can push us away from everything we claim to want: achievement, stability, recognition, and personal evolution. Fear of success lives quietly beneath the surface, hiding in hesitation, procrastination, or a sudden loss of motivation right at the moment things begin going well. It convinces us that staying small is safer than expanding into a version of ourselves we have never known. And because success demands change, both internal and external, it activates deep emotional patterns that tell us to tear down what we've worked so hard to build. On the surface, wanting success looks straightforward. People dream, plan, and strive for it. But underneath, success threatens the comfort of familiarity. When someone succeeds, their relationships shift, their responsibilities grow, and the expectations placed on them often increase. This can feel overwhelming, especially for individuals who have learned to associate attention or visibility with danger, judgment, or pressure. The mind begins to whisper subtle warnings. What if I can't keep this up? What if people discover I'm not as good as they think? What if success isolates me? These thoughts create a psychic tension that makes destruction seem like relief. Tearing down what we've built becomes a way to return to a predictable emotional environment, even if that environment is disappointing or painful. Fear of success is also intertwined with identity. We anchor ourselves to the stories we've been told about who we are, by family, culture, past experiences, and even trauma. If someone grows up believing they are average, unlucky, or destined for struggle, success contradicts the foundation of their self-image. The mind resists contradictions. It prefers coherence over growth. So when progress begins, the subconscious may sabotage it to protect the identity it knows. Success demands a new internal narrative, and rewriting that narrative can feel like erasing parts of oneself. Even if the old story was limiting, it was familiar. Sometimes people would rather destroy their progress than face the discomfort of becoming someone new. Another layer of fear of success comes from the perceived consequences of maintaining achievement. Success is often romanticized as a final destination, but in reality, it's a beginning, a starting point for new levels of effort. Reaching a goal can create the pressure to exceed it next time. For some, this pressure feels unbearable. They imagine success as a weight, more performance, more expectations, more eyes watching. Instead of being a reward, success becomes a burden. The anticipation of that burden can make self-sabotage feel like self-protection. If one never fully succeeds, one never has to maintain anything. Past experiences also shape how people relate to achievement. If a person's early successes were met with jealousy, criticism, punishment, or indifference, their nervous system may associate success with negative outcomes. Even achievements that once brought pride can become sources of anxiety if they triggered conflict or made others uncomfortable. Without realizing it, the person learns that standing out leads to emotional danger. As an adult, this conditioning shows up subtly. They may delay finishing projects, avoid opportunities, or downplay their abilities. When something they build begins to flourish, their mind rushes to dismantle it before someone else can hurt them for it. Fear of success also interacts with perfectionism. Many people believe that if they succeed once, they must replicate that success flawlessly every time. This pressure turns possibility into paralysis. The idea of being evaluated or compared becomes terrifying. In the face of perfectionistic expectations, sabotage becomes an escape route. It feels easier to destroy progress than to risk falling short later. Ironically, the person may interpret their self-sabotage as failure while overlooking that the failure was intentionally constructed as a shield. Sometimes, fear of success is linked to guilt. If someone comes from an environment where others struggled, suffered, or lacked opportunities, their own success may feel like betrayal. Achieving more than their parents, siblings, or peers can stir up a sense of disloyalty. They may fear being judged as arrogant or forgetting their roots. To avoid emotional conflict, they unconsciously tear down what they build, choosing familiarity over evolution. This isn't weakness, it's a misdirected attempt to maintain connection. Ultimately, fear of success leads people to undermine their own progress not because they don't want better lives, but because success threatens the psychological structures that help them survive. The mind equates sameness with safety, even when sameness is painful. So when growth begins, it triggers an internal alarm system, warning that change is dangerous. Tear down behaviors. Quitting suddenly, avoiding responsibility, creating conflict, or restarting endlessly are not signs of laziness. They are signs of fear. Overcoming this fear requires recognizing it. Awareness is the first interruption in the cycle. When someone learns to observe the moment sabotage begins, when they notice the urge to withdraw, delay, or destroy, they create space to question the fear rather than obey it. They can ask themselves, what am I afraid success will require of me? What old story am I trying to protect? Who do I think I'll disappoint by growing? These questions help reveal the deeper emotional patterns driving the tear-down impulse. Fear of success is not a flaw. It is a natural response to unfamiliar possibilities. But when left unexamined, it becomes a silent architect of destruction. By understanding the hidden costs, expectations, and identities tied to success, people can begin to build without feeling threatened by what they create. And slowly the fear shifts, not into disappearance, but into a companion that no longer dictates the direction of one's life. You said, impatience is one of the most subtle yet powerful forces that lead people to tear down what they build. In a world that rewards speed, instant gratification, and immediate results, patience has become almost unnatural. People want transformation without discomfort, success without setbacks, progress without plateaus. When things don't unfold quickly enough, they feel threatened, discouraged, or inadequate. This impatience creates emotional pressure, and instead of enduring it, many choose to abandon their efforts entirely. They convince themselves the goal wasn't meant for them, the timing isn't right, or they need a fresh start. In reality, impatience distorts perception. It makes slow progress look like failure and makes steady growth feel like stagnation. Because of this distortion, people sabotage their own efforts long before they experience the returns of consistency. Impatience is deeply connected to the human desire for certainty. When someone embarks on a new journey, whether building a skill, improving their health, repairing a relationship, or working toward a dream, they expect to see signs that they're on the right path. They want reassurance that their effort is working. When progress is invisible or slower than expected, uncertainty grows. The mind begins to question, is this worth it? Am I wasting my time? What if nothing changes? These questions create frustration, and frustration often pushes people to undo everything they've worked for. They prefer the false certainty of quitting over the uncomfortable uncertainty of continuing without immediate proof. Another layer of impatience comes from comparison. People look at others who appear to be progressing faster, achieving more, or succeeding with ease, and they feel behind. Social media intensifies this feeling, presenting curated snapshots of success without the struggle behind it. When individuals compare their slow, messy, real life journey to someone else's highlight reel, they internalize the belief that their pace is inadequate. This belief fuels impatience, and impatience fuels the urge to quit prematurely. Instead of recognizing that growth is non-linear and unique to each person, they assume their slower progress means something is wrong with them or their approach. Rather than enduring the discomfort, they dismantle their efforts in an attempt to avoid the shame that comparison triggered. Impatience also arises from an unrealistic relationship with effort. Many people carry subconscious expectations that meaningful growth should feel smooth, inspiring, or easy. When the initial motivation fades, and it always does, they interpret the loss of enthusiasm as a sign that they're on the wrong path. They treat discomfort, boredom, or difficulty as evidence that they should stop. In truth, these experiences are natural phases of any long-term endeavor, but because they were never taught to anticipate them, they panic when things feel hard. Panic drives sabotage. They scrap their plans, start something new, or return to old habits that feel comfortable. The cycle repeats, leaving them with a trail of abandoned beginnings. In relationships, impatience plays a different but equally destructive role. Many people want connection, understanding, and harmony without the slow process of building emotional safety. When conflicts arise, especially early in a relationship, they assume something is fundamentally wrong. They expect instant compatibility, instant healing, instant comfort. When reality doesn't match that fantasy, impatience surfaces as frustration or hopelessness. Instead of working through challenges, they withdraw, push the other person away, or end the relationship prematurely. They tear down what they were building because they mistake normal relational discomfort for incompatibility or failure. In personal habits, impatience often shows up as an all or nothing mentality. A person may begin a new routine exercise, writing, boundaries, mindfulness, with enthusiasm. But when they miss a day or experience a setback, impatience with themselves turns into self-criticism. If I can't do it perfectly, why bother? This criticism becomes a justification for quitting entirely. They tear down weeks or months of progress because they cannot tolerate imperfection. Impatience convinces them that falling short means starting over, even though consistency, not perfection, is what creates long-term change. People also sabotage their progress when they expect results that align with unrealistic timelines. If someone believes they should master a skill within weeks, heal old wounds quickly, or build a stable life in a straight line, they set themselves up for disappointment. When their expectations clash with reality, impatience creates emotional pressure. Instead of adjusting their expectations, they abandon their pursuit. They tell themselves they're incapable, not realizing that the issue was never their ability, it was their timeline. Impatience is often rooted in deeper emotional wounds. For some, slowness feels unsafe because it reminds them of past disappointments or situations where waiting led to pain. They may have grown up in environments where uncertainty was dangerous, where outcomes were unpredictable, or where patience was punished rather than rewarded. In such cases, impatience becomes a survival strategy. Move quickly, avoid vulnerability, don't stay in the unknown for too long. This old survival mechanism follows them into adulthood, influencing how they respond to growth. When progress is slow, they feel emotionally unsafe, and tearing down what they're building becomes a way to escape that feeling. Another aspect of impatience is the fear of emotional investment. The more time, effort, or energy someone invests in something, the more loss they risk if it doesn't work out. Impatience becomes a preemptive defense. If I quit now, it won't hurt as much. They sabotage before they succeed because success requires sustained effort, and sustained effort creates emotional vulnerability. Ending early feels like protection, even though it leads to long-term regret. Ultimately, impatience causes destruction because it distorts how people interpret their progress. It convinces them that slow means failing, uncomfortable means impossible, and imperfect means worthless. It blinds them to the truth that growth takes time, resilience, and consistency. When people learn to tolerate slow progress, to sit with uncertainty, and to trust the process even without visible results, they stop tearing down the foundations they've worked so hard to build. Patience becomes a form of emotional maturity, a steady force that transforms efforts into outcomes and prevents sabotage from winning the internal battle. Perfectionism is one of the most deceptive forces behind why people tear down what they build. On the surface, perfectionism looks like a desire for excellence, high standards, attention to detail, commitment to doing things the right way. But underneath that polished exterior lies fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. Perfectionism doesn't drive people forward, it traps them in an exhausting cycle of starting, stopping, revising, and destroying. It convinces them that if something cannot be flawless, it shouldn't exist at all. As a result, they tear down projects, relationships, opportunities, and dreams the moment they begin to show signs of real-world imperfection. One of the central problems with perfectionism is its reliance on an unattainable standard. The perfectionist mind doesn't simply want things done well. It demands that things unfold exactly as imagined with no deviation. When results inevitably fall short of those unrealistic visions, frustration sets in. Instead of adapting or adjusting expectations, the person begins to feel a sense of failure. They might think, if I can't make this perfect, then there's no point in continuing. This mindset leads them to rip apart their progress, convinced they are saving themselves from future embarrassment or disappointment. In reality, they are destroying work that was already meaningful simply because it didn't match an impossible ideal. Perfectionism also creates an overwhelming fear of being seen. When someone builds something, whether a creative project, a career milestone, or a healthier version of themselves, they must eventually confront visibility. Visibility invites evaluation. For a perfectionist, evaluation is terrifying because their self-worth is tied to the outcome. If what they present is flawed, they believe it reflects the flaws within them. Instead of risking exposure, they tear down their work before anyone else can judge it. This self-protective instinct masquerades as discretion or not being ready, but at its core is fear of vulnerability. They prefer to destroy their progress privately rather than risk public imperfection. Another way perfectionism leads to sabotage is through the avoidance of mistakes. Mistakes are essential to growth. They provide feedback, build resilience, and shape understanding. But perfectionists interpret mistakes as catastrophes. The possibility of making one feels intolerable. Rather than risking that discomfort, they may abandon their efforts entirely. For example, someone writing a book may delete entire chapters because they don't meet imagined standards. Someone trying to improve their health may quit after a single misstep because they no longer feel perfectly on track. Perfectionism turns minor setbacks into evidence of total inadequacy. To regain psychological safety, they tear down everything and start over, hoping that next time they will achieve flawlessness. Perfectionism also fuels chronic dissatisfaction. Even when a person makes genuine progress, the perfectionist mindset minimizes it. They focus on what's missing rather than what's gained, what's wrong rather than what's working. No accomplishment feels good enough to justify continuing. With each step, the gap between reality and their imagined ideal becomes more painful. Instead of celebrating growth, they fixate on deficiencies. Eventually, the dissatisfaction becomes unbearable, pushing them to scrap their progress and begin again. This cycle leaves them stuck in perpetual beginnings, always restarting, never progressing far enough to experience the benefits of consistency. In relationships, perfectionism can be equally destructive. A perfectionist may expect flawless communication, constant harmony, or unwavering emotional clarity. When conflicts arise, as they naturally do in any relationship, they interpret the tension as evidence that the relationship is flawed beyond repair. Instead of working through disagreements, they may withdraw or even end the connection in search of something that meets their idealized standards. This leads to a pattern of emotional instability where relationships are repeatedly built and then dismantled because they fail to meet unrealistic expectations. Perfectionism blocks intimacy because intimacy requires embracing imperfect humans. Another hidden aspect of perfectionism is the belief that success must feel effortless or natural. If something requires sustained effort, repeated attempts, or trial and error, the perfectionist may conclude they are not truly talented or capable. They fear that struggle reveals inadequacy, so instead of embracing the learning curve, they quit. Even when they are making progress, they tear down what they've built because the effort required makes them feel flawed. Ironically, this prevents them from reaching the mastery they desperately crave. Perfectionism often stems from environments where worth was conditional. People who grew up receiving praise only for high achievement, who were punished for imperfections, or who internalized the belief that love must be earned often carry these patterns into adulthood. They learn that being imperfect is dangerous. As adults, they destroy their progress not because they don't want success, but because they fear the consequences of presenting anything less than ideal. Their sabotage becomes a distorted form of self-preservation. There is also a paradox within perfectionism, the illusion that starting over will eventually lead to the perfect outcome. Each time they tear something down, they imagine that next time will be the time they get it right. But next time never arrives. The cycle becomes addictive. The idea of perfection becomes more comforting than the messy reality of follow-through. This keeps the person stuck in preparation mode, planning, imagining, revising, but rarely completing anything. They trade progress for the fantasy of a flawless future. Ultimately, perfectionism is an illusion that keeps people from experiencing real growth. It tells them that safety comes from flawlessness, when in truth, safety comes from resilience. It convinces them that mistakes are evidence of failure, when in reality, mistakes are the path to mastery. It persuades them to tear down what they build, not because their work is unworthy, but because they fear being seen as imperfect. To break free from perfectionism, a person must learn to tolerate imperfection as part of the process, not a sign of failure. They must shift from all or nothing thinking to gradual progress, from fear of evaluation to acceptance of vulnerability. When they learn to embrace what is real instead of chasing what is ideal, they can finally build without destroying, create without retreating, and grow without sabotaging themselves. Emotional cycles play a profound role in why people tear down what they build. These cycles, patterns of mood, insecurity, motivation, and fear, tend to repeat in predictable rhythms even when a person believes they've changed. Just as seasons shift, emotional states fluctuate. A person may feel inspired, confident, and determined one week, only to wake up the next drowning in self-doubt or apathy. Because these emotional cycles feel so real and consuming in the moment, people often make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. They dismantle progress that took weeks or months to build simply because they entered a low emotional phase. The destruction isn't logical, it's emotional. When a person doesn't understand their internal rhythms, they mistake passing emotions for absolute truth. Emotional cycles often begin with a surge of energy, motivation, hope, or excitement. In this phase, people build quickly. They start projects, make commitments, plan their futures, and feel certain about their direction. The emotional high fuels productivity and optimism, making it easy to believe that this new version of themselves is permanent. But emotional highs are not sustainable. They eventually give way to more neutral or low states. When the initial energy fades, the person may feel confused, discouraged, or empty. Instead of recognizing this as a natural emotional dip, they interpret it as failure. They assume something is wrong with them or their efforts. And in that state, tearing down what they built feels like relief, like closing a chapter that suddenly feels too heavy to carry. These cycles are especially powerful for people who have not been taught emotional regulation. If someone has spent years reacting to their feelings rather than observing them, they may experience each emotional shift as a crisis. For example, a person who feels deeply motivated on Monday might set ambitious goals or commitments. But by Thursday, when their mood drops, they may feel overwhelmed or incapable. Instead of adjusting their expectations or acknowledging that low energy is temporary, they may scrap their entire plan. The emotional discomfort takes precedence over logic. They destroy what they built because in that moment, destruction feels like control. Another aspect of emotional cycles is self-doubt. Many individuals have internalized beliefs that they will eventually fail, be rejected, or fall short. These beliefs may remain quiet during emotional highs but become loud and intrusive during lows. When the cycle dips, self-doubt resurfaces with force. Who do you think you are? You can't pull this off. You'll disappoint people. This isn't good enough. These thoughts feel convincing because the emotional state reinforces them. In that moment, tearing down progress looks like self-protection, a way to avoid future disappointment or embarrassment. The person convinces themselves it's better to quit now than be proven inadequate later. Emotional cycles also influence relationships. Someone may feel deeply connected and open during emotional highs, making plans for deeper intimacy or cooperation. But when a low emotional phase hits, vulnerability can feel frightening. The instinct is to withdraw, sabotage closeness, or push others away. They may start arguments, shut down communication, or convince themselves that the relationship is not right simply because they no longer feel the intense connection they felt earlier. This creates a destructive pattern of building closeness and then dismantling it whenever emotions shift. Because the person's feelings change, they assume the relationship has changed, not realizing they are projecting internal cycles onto external connections. For individuals with histories of emotional instability, trauma, or inconsistent environments, emotional cycles may feel unpredictable and overwhelming. They may associate emotional lows with danger or rejection because past experiences conditioned them to fear negative emotions. When a low hits, their body may respond as if something catastrophic is happening, even if it's simply a natural fluctuation. The urge to destroy commitments, relationships, or progress can be a survival response, an attempt to escape the emotional discomfort they never learned to manage. In these cases, tearing down progress is not laziness or lack of desire. It is the mind's attempt to regain emotional equilibrium. One of the most painful aspects of emotional cycles is how they can distort perception. When someone is in a high emotional state, they see possibility everywhere. When they are in a low state, they see obstacles everywhere. The external situation may not have changed at all, but their internal lens has. If someone doesn't recognize this lens shift, they may falsely believe their goal is impossible, their effort pointless, or their abilities insufficient. They destroy their progress because, in that moment, it genuinely looks like the right decision. Later, when their emotions shift again, they regret the destruction. But by then they may feel too ashamed or discouraged to start over. Another powerful dynamic in emotional cycles is the desire to relieve pressure. During low phases, everything feels heavier: responsibilities, expectations, unfinished work, even hope itself. Tearing something down provides immediate relief. The pressure disappears. This relief can become addictive. Each time emotional discomfort arises, the person learns they can escape it by quitting or destroying what they've built. Over time, this becomes a conditioned response. They no longer tear things down because they don't want them, but because they've trained themselves to seek relief through destruction. Breaking free from emotional cycles requires learning to separate feelings from facts. A low emotional phase doesn't mean failure. Discouragement doesn't mean something is wrong. Emotional fatigue doesn't mean a goal isn't worth pursuing. When people begin observing their emotional patterns instead of reacting impulsively to them, they regain control over their behavior. They learn to pause during dips rather than destroy. They learn to rest rather than quit. They begin building with a long-term mindset instead of a moment-by-moment emotional interpretation. Ultimately, emotional cycles don't have to be the enemy. When understood, they become predictable rhythms that can be navigated rather than feared. But when misunderstood, they lead to repeated sabotage, tearing down everything the moment inner weather changes. Learning to endure emotional lows without destroying progress is one of the most transformative skills a person can develop. It turns survival patterns into growth patterns, and emotional turbulence into a temporary season rather than a reason to give up.